Well, let's start. Tonight's Thursday, January 28th, Town of Webster Board Workshop. First item of business, or discussion tonight actually, but it is a business item, is I have two resolutions here. Making a motion. First resolution, I'm making a motion to appoint Griff Stappenbeck to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilman Cato?
Aye.
Councilman Abbott?
Aye.
Councilwoman Cataldi? Aye.
And just as, that is a 5-year term. Because the second motion I am making is to appoint Jamie Newtown to the Zoning Board of Appeals to finish Eric Snyder's term.
Second. Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilwoman Cataldi? Aye. Councilman Abbott?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilman Cato?
Aye.
And I think that term expires at the end of 22. I think there's 2 years left on it. Okay, that's all the formal business tonight. I know usually we don't like to do resolutions at workshops. It's a non-monetary item, and just in the scheduling of our various citizens boards, that worked very well. Our first topic tonight for discussion and presentation is, well, I know Janine. I'm not sure if I know the other young lady over there.
Lexi.
Hi, Lexi. How are you?
Good.
And they're from Wen, and they're gonna present discuss legislation on how youth access and purchase tobacco and vape products. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Go ahead.
So thank you for allowing us to be here tonight and present. Again, I'm Lexi Popovich. I work for the American Lung Association. So I'm just going to give a little bit of rundown about what we're here to present, just a few minutes, some education about it, and then I'll pass that over to Janine, and then we can kind of open it up for discussion or any questions that you guys do have. So we go around and educate to different town boards and village boards about, it's called retailer density or point of sale policies. So recently, in the past few years, with the vaping and e-cigarette epidemic that we've kind of seen in all the municipalities around the county and then around the country as well, we are really trying to educate on policies that can kind of curb access to e-cigarettes, those that can curb accessibility for youth to these deadly products. So in New York State, we are a preemption state. That means that the state allows municipalities to create local policies that can kind of curb use of where retailers are and where they can be in a certain municipality. So that's what a point of sale policy. It's the point of sale where you can buy and purchase tobacco and vape retailers. So what we educate about is things we've worked with other towns. So the town of Brighton and the town of Perrington, we have worked with on a zoning policy. So they have both zoned, Brighton has zoned their vape shops to the adult use entertainment zones. So those are primarily away from schools. Those are away from youth center locations. Perrington has also zoned their vape and tobacco retailers to their adult use areas. And the reason to do so is to keep, those tobacco and vape retailers away from schools where kids can kind of walk across. It's known that if they're within 1,000 feet of schools or youth-centered locations, that they're more likely to access these products, to use these products, and to become addicted to these products. So again, those are the two towns we have worked with. Right now we're working with Irondequoit as well. So those are the two zoning policies, but we also provide education on licensing policies. So that is when you can attach a license to some of the retailers. If, say, they're selling to minors, there can be different violations or stipulations that happen. And of course, we're not here to shut anyone down. We're pro small business, but we're also pro protecting the health of our young adults in Webster as well. So in terms of licensing and zoning policies, I did provide information on a map that we have. I'm not sure if anyone's taken a look at it, but it shows where your tobacco and vape retailers are in Webster. and their relation to youth center locations. So again, we're here to kind of educate the board and answer any questions. I know that with Irondequoit moving in this direction for licensing and zoning policies, I know there's a lot of interest in a couple other towns and villages across the county that want to kind of cap the number of retailers in the town. Along with capping the number of retailers, you can decide where each vape and tobacco retailer can be. Again, we have zoning in adult use areas, but you can cap, say, the number at 5 tobacco and vape retailers allowed in the town of Webster. And through attrition over time, you can leave it at that cap. You can create a 1,000-foot buffer around schools and youth center locations where no tobacco or vape retailer can exist around that 1,000-foot buffer. You can create a 1,000-foot buffer between retailers so that's not a lot of high density in the town of Webster. So those are just kind of some of the things that we work on in the community. And again, we'll open up for any questions and discussion more, but I will pass this over to Janine.
Thank you, Lexi. Lexi is a member of the Webster Health and Education Network, and we've worked together on a variety of topics related to this area. And we know that youth vaping is a serious issue, and we've heard that both from the youth themselves and from parents. Vaping is, kids are putting many different things into electronic devices. Nicotine is the #1 substance that's being vaped, and it is almost instantaneously addicting. And we've heard from youth about how difficult it is to stop using these devices. We have to, as a coalition, identify 2 substances at least that we're focusing on in terms of prevention. Our substances are nicotine and vaping them together, and alcohol, because we know that that is the highest, has the highest rate of use amongst youth. So we are asking that the board give this strong consideration, because you can have an impact on our future generations, our current generation and future generations in terms of this insidious epidemic, actually.
Thank you both. I just want to say I'm the town board representative on the Webster Health Education Network. And this is a presentation that we've been talking about doing at a workshop for probably well over a year. And then COVID struck and weren't able to come in and present. So I'm very pleased that you're both here tonight so that we could possibly take a look at this and talk about it and see what we might be able to do. Personally, I think that, I live in the village, and I know that there's a vape shop on Main Street, which is right down the road from Spry. Kids walk to and from school all the time, and it certainly is very available. I'm supposed to talk in my mic. Okay, thanks, Karen. So they certainly have access to that. You also focus on alcohol. I think alcohol sales to minors, to me, seems to be more regulated than perhaps some of the nicotine products. I doubt that a middle schooler can walk into a liquor store and buy a bottle of vodka. But I don't know if that's the case for vape shops. I'm sure it's supposed to be regulated, but I really don't know the details of that.
As you know, Patty, we've had lots of discussion about this on the coalition, but youth have very creative ways of getting what they want. Mm-hmm. Alcohol, whatever it is they want, they will find it. And really that's our goal tonight, is to not only ask for your assistance with this project, but to raise awareness in our community about, we might think that things are not accessible to kids, but they get it from other kids, they get it from older kids, they get it from families, parents, believe it or not. So our job is a pretty big one, and it's an important one. So just hoping to continue to work together with you all.
Thank you.
And I was wondering if anyone had any questions. I know that was just kind of a brief overview. It can be more logistical than that, obviously, with legal matters involved in terms of its legislative for zoning and licensing policies, but I wasn't sure if anyone had specific questions that we could answer and kind of get more in depth with that was
So obviously, it's against the law for anyone, was it 21 or 18? Yeah,
21 now.
21
Yep,
now,
New York
right?
State is tobacco 21.
So I read through the legislation, 276, and it's pretty comprehensive, and you know, obviously I read through it again, but one thing I'm not in favor of, whether it be this legislation or other legislation, is government overreach. I absolutely understand there's an issue with vaping. You're 100% right. I do know that the kids are getting it online too, okay? So I think we, as our discussions move forward, we have to, you know, walk a fine line between government overreach while at the same time addressing the issue. And it is an issue. I absolutely understand, and I greatly appreciate all this information. I have to go through the rest of this. I've read this. But I think further discussions are in order for sure. My question is, from an enforcement standpoint now, who or what entity would be, say if we had a problem with a local vape shop where reports were coming in, is that an ATF issue or is it a local police issue or both?
So for Monroe County, it's called a TUPA. It's Adolescent Tobacco Use Prevention Act. So they actually do most of the underage checks around the county.
Right.
So that would just fall into the purview of things that they're already doing. So they can facilitate that. I know WEN and some other coalitions are actually doing other things, like educating about that as well. But yeah, usually that is a TUPA. So there's really no extra financial cost or anything like that. And I will say with the vapes, for New York State, they can no longer, kids cannot order vapes to private residences anymore. So that is something that did pass during COVID, actually, this past summer. So that
Did I
is
know that?
something
Good.
that did pass.
Well, in response to, or actually to follow on Mr. Cahill's question, is that a Department of Health, Monroe County Department of Health, or is it a sheriff's unit? What is the enforcement unit?
So it's not county health. So a TUPA is under a county department. I'm not particularly sure, but I can send that website, and everyone can take a look at that. But yeah, it's not under the Board of Health, and it also depends. Say if you were to do a licensing policy through the municipal government, you know, you can kind of do whatever you want through there. So it wouldn't be like a Board of Health. It'd be through the town of Webster. But a TUPA would still be doing checks across the board, regardless of if you say that you can zone tobacco retail shops to adult use areas. It really wouldn't change much. If we're talking about tobacco 21, then you kind of get into that, but that's already had passed in the state. But say you're just no longer giving licenses to those in maybe non-adult use zones, then there's really not much changing there.
So say for example, one of our local gas stations, obviously they sell vape and cigarettes and tobacco.
Right.
Don't they already have to have a license to sell that?
Yes.
So by doing another license,
Yes.
you're just making it more restrictive with another license, correct?
That's if you choose to go licensing, zoning different. Zoning, it would just kind of like Parrington and Brighton did. You just put an addendum in. But for licensing, yes, it would then be a local license that if they don't adhere to it, then, you know, there could be violations and penalties.
Well, if they already have to have a license to sell tobacco, and they're in violation of that,
Right.
what's the enforcement? Who's the enforcer?
So that's you have to have a license under the state to have any vape or tobacco retailer. And that's the State Department of Health. So that's where that license comes from. But any type of licensing policy, you can just add into any type of code, and then you can say where, you know, say if they do violate, the state doesn't say you have to, you know, shut it down. But some places that around the state that are municipal run, they can say you violated once or twice, we're not gonna renew your license next year. Or if you know, so they won't renew a license, and then you can't actually operate, no new license can come in, or new employer and have a tobacco or vape retailer in that location. So those are just some of the small scale licensing things that they're kind of talking about.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I certainly agree with Councilman Cahill that we don't want to get into government overreach, but when we talk about zoning, we do zone adult use, and all that entails with adult entertainment. We do choose a zone for that in the town and where it's appropriate. And I don't know that I really want to entertain licensing and getting into all of that, but I think it's worth taking a look at perhaps including it in adult zones. And that does not count those that are already in existence. I mean, we can't put them out of business, and that's not our intent. But for future use, I think it's something we should take a look at.
And just so I want to make sure, the age to legally purchase tobacco or vape products, which is probably not considered tobacco, and alcohol, is 21.
Yes, so all,
Okay.
yep, in New York State, all vape, tobacco, nicotine products is 21.
Okay.
Two things. I'm aware that the Webster Police Department does compliance checks. So they will have a young person go with them into a store, and they will have the young person attempt to purchase. And 3 retailers were cited the last time they did compliance checks. They were supposed to do them again this past fall, but because of COVID, they weren't able to. So that's something that is in terms of their purview. They run compliance checks.
These are like the sting operations, in other words.
Yeah.
All right, what was the, of the 3 businesses that were found to sell to underage persons, what happened to them? You said they were cited. What did that mean?
I honestly don't know what
Okay.
happens when there's a follow-up. We just have, we use that data to try to say that 3 businesses were cited, and we want to reduce the number of those. So part of what we do as a coalition is offer education about the We Card training, so that businesses have a good basis on how to, and the importance of carding youth
Yeah.
or anybody that comes
But
in.
it was the Webster Police in this case that did the investigation, and
Yes.
it was their personnel that went along with found the witnesses, if you will.
Yes.
Or the participants,
Yep.
okay.
And I just recently heard about the master plan, which includes plans for zoning. Is that something that's coming up soon that needs to be
Are
redone?
you talking about the comprehensive plan?
Comprehensive plan.
That's it.
Sorry.
There is definitely a plan to try to update the 2008 version of the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
But I don't think anybody on this board could sit here and tell you that it's going to start on a certain date. There are some foundational things we're doing. In fact, after this meeting, there's some code classes that are somewhat foundational to that.
Okay.
But that is when zoning will be addressed globally for the town.
But that's not something, zoning can be addressed separate from that, or no?
No.
No, it's only when the comprehensive plan is being,
Oh, no, we can.
No, you
Yeah,
can.
I mean, that's,
oh, you can do an addendum.
yeah, well, Charlie,
Well,
you're probably the best to answer this.
They can change zoning laws, add zoning laws, amend zoning laws anytime. Yeah, they can, no, it's not limited to a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is a guide that most municipalities use as a sort of a template. But no, in terms of any kind of legislation affecting zoning, the town's not limited to any time period or any other document. They can change the zoning laws or change zoning maps as they will, as they vote.
All right, thank you.
I also think it's important to note that Janine commented, they're certainly not anti-small business, and what you just said is that you go out and you offer training about We Card.
Yeah.
So it's really more of a partnership
Yeah.
between the Webster Health Education Network, the school district, the town, the village, and in the community and the business people on keeping our youth healthy and helping them to make good choices.
Absolutely.
You offer training to parents also, right? I think that's very important. I know I attended one of your training sessions, and I was pretty amazed at some of the contraptions that they would hide. That I could not believe it. But yeah, I think it's very important work that you do, especially from training the parents. And I know you get in front of kids at school too, right?
When we can.
Yeah. Because I don't think a lot of parents, maybe I could be wrong, are really until they actually experience it firsthand with either their kids or their friends' kids, the lengths to which some of these kids will go to hide it from parents. And we were all kids at one time, and we all knew, we all figured we were smarter than our parents, but yeah, it's an issue, and you open my eyes up that night for the training. So I think it's very important that you continue to do that, especially for the parents, because I'll admit it, I was clueless. I learned a lot that night.
I hate to do this. We've come up against it. We have a bit of a truncated meeting tonight.
Yep.
Thank you, Janine and Lexi. It gives us a lot to think about. But I think we all would agree that we'd like to help in some way or another locally, make sure that kids aren't getting this easily. I like the fact that the age is 21. I like the fact that the Webster police are already doing the compliance checks. My daughter, years ago, as a 16-year-old, worked for the Rochester Police Department doing that job, going into stores. Would you call it a sting operation, Attorney Johnson? Okay. Actually, this is just off the top of my head. I would rather do more of those with the Webster Police and have the penalties be very severe than, I think, go down the path of local zoning or laws. But I'm just thinking out loud. If they know the rules and you're a store owner and you don't follow the rules, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you if you get cited and there's a fine. I guess that's the best way I can
Mix of
put it.
both.
Pardon?
I would like to see a healthy.
Well, and that's why we got a lot to think about, because, they're licensed by the state. It sounds like the county right now is doing enforcement. Now we get the town involved. You do run the risk of overregulation, but there is a balance. I'm sure we can come to it.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lexi and
Anytime,
Janine.
any more conversation, anytime.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
The question, Braden, is are you going to be able to pick us up some minutes for Mad's presentation, or are you like, hey, you went 3 minutes over, so I'm going to 6:03?
Whatever your pleasure is.
Well, I just figured that I'm not even sure if the rest of the town board members are aware of the upcoming deadline for the town to adopt, vote on as a resolution, and submit to the state of New York our pandemic policy. So I figured this is as good a time as ever to at least present it. And Brayton is, would it be correct to say, Brayton, that you're kind of spearheading this for the town?
Yes. So Braden Connor, Director of Personnel for the town of Webster. And how much time? So I'm going to gauge my presentation based on your response.
How about 8 minutes?
Okay. All right, so New York State has adopted an additional unfunded mandate requiring every local government and municipal organization to adopt a public health emergency plan. And this is separate and above any of the other emergency planning requirements that have been in place for many years. New York State, to this date, the legislation authorized New York State to promulgate regulations and rules around that law, and they have yet to do that. So in the absence of any guidance from New York State, a number of the kind of governmental trade organizations have been educating their members, such as New York State Association of Towns, NYMER, PERMA, and so there is a widely distributed template plan that is being used across New York State to come into compliance. The Webster Safety Committee has met and discussed this requirement, and we have a version 2 draft of the plan that is based off of the existing template, and also with some initial input from the town of Shiloh. But some of the key factors are that the law was signed into law on Labor Day and said that by April 1st of the following year, every municipality had to adopt one of these plans. And in addition, by the 150th day past signing of the law, they had to show a draft to the union if there was one. And so that deadline is coming up on February 4th, that we have to share a draft. We've already shared with our 3 unions our draft 1, which was admittedly a beginning draft based on the template. We'll share draft 2 before that February 4th deadline. The fire marshal, who's chair of the safety committee, and I have been working on the project, and we hope to start distributing draft 2 to department heads to see if it lines up with their expectations, this coming week. And so I think we are on track to reach compliance. In the broadest strokes of the plan, you have to designate what functions are essential and non-essential. And the law says for purposes of this plan, essential means has to be done on site. The work has to be done on site. Non-essential means it can be done remotely. So that phrase essential and non-essential means many different things in many different laws. It might mean something different in a collective bargaining agreement or anything like that. But for this, it's basically who has to work on site during a public health emergency and who can work remotely. And then once you designate the function, you then have to identify by job title positions that are essential. And you have to kind of demonstrate that you've thought through possible scenarios such as remote work or staggered shifts, employee leave options, PPE storage and procurement, protocols for emergency housing for essential personnel, and health testing, quarantining, contact tracing. So in some ways, this is kind of the perfect time to do such a plan because we are literally living this plan right now. If I had a criticism, it would be that the old adage that generals prepare to fight the last war, not the next war. And so this seems very COVID specific, and we don't know what the next thing will be. So the point of that, other than just editorializing, is that the plan needs to be broad and interpretable enough to be useful for whoever the decision makers are in place at the time. And so if the plan is highly specific, that will actually impede the decision making of people in an emergent situation. So the plan right now is 12 pages long, and it's very comprehensive, but yet it is relatively broad. With that, I yield to questions.
When will we get to see the second draft?
That is a great question. Let's see, we have to have it adopted by April 1st, so I would think that by the beginning of March, if not sooner, the town board would have copies, for input. It really depends on if, when I show it to department heads, we've missed essential elements that require, a lot of detailed working.
Sure, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I know you and I have talked a little bit about, the under-promise, over-deliver. I would like to see the first, if possible, board meeting of March, when the board would be voting on this, because then if we miss it, we have the second board meeting of March to do it. If we gear everything around the second board meeting of March, and all of a sudden there's a snafu, to make it by April 1st, we would have to do a special board meeting.
That's fine, as long as we have the information long in advance of that meeting.
Absolutely, Barry. Yeah.
We should have the information by the end of February at the latest. So we have time to look at it, review it. Questions can get answered.
I don't see any problem with meeting any of those expectations, and so I'm confident we'll be able to deliver with adequate time for every board member to review it, comment, and improve upon it.
Okay.
Ray, is this going to require a local law? Or is this just basically a town policy?
Well, I did not see anywhere where it called for a local law, that would require a hearing, but I do believe it must be adopted by the governing body.
Would it become part of our code?
Yeah, I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna defer to Charlie, but also offer my opinion and say I wouldn't recommend it, because it's a planning document, and that seems to imply to me that it's a living document that has to be flexible, and it should probably be reviewed annually. And so codifying something seems to be something that would be appropriate and
I agree
long-standing.
with you, that's why I was concerned.
So like the safety committee would look at it once a year and make the
Yes.
recommendations to us?
Yes, if there was going to be changes to the plan for readoption, if the plan wasn't really going to change, then I don't think.
I think Braden started out by saying this would be in addition to any current emergency plans, correct?
Yes, and my focus on that was that, there are already existing laws of safety to have, succession planning, or what is it, order of succession. Also, town of Webster has portions in the G'day zone, and I know that the town has safety protocols around that they drill on all the time. And so the state was very clear that no existing plan, no matter how good it is, can substitute for your new plan.
Well, it seems to be pandemic specific. Yes? It seems to be pandemic specific.
It's public health emergency.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a little different from anything else that we had envisioned since the Spanish flu.
Yep,
Thanks, Braden.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, Ahmed.
Yeah, that's right, happy anniversary to us.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. All right, I'll try and be quick. We'll do what we can. So, thank you very much, Supervisor and town board members. I'm here to give our 2020 EMS year in review, and you'll note that the packet this year is a lot lighter than the normal 2 page, or heavier than the normal 2 pages. But a lot of it we're going to move through quickly. So, on page 1, I'd like to just call out that in 2020, NEQ answered 3,050 or received 3,051 calls. We answered 94.4% of those. And, the line that's probably most relevant on this piece of paper, 16 cardiac arrest stays in the town of Webster last year. 11 RSI responses, and we delivered 1 baby. 16 people are back in the town of Webster because of the EMS crews in our agency. The other thing that's worth noting in this point is that when I came to you in August last year, we were expecting to be down 390 calls. Our second and third quarters were disastrous. Our fourth quarter we couldn't keep up with. I mean, we had a 40-call day. And if you'll remember, it was a few years ago, I think before Supervisor Flaherty was here, I came and reported we had a 24-call one day and we were exhausted and it was a big deal. When I saw the run log and we had a 40-call day and we only dropped 2 that day, Our crews did an amazing job, but it just showed it was right on the heels of the holidays, and we just got crushed one day. And spent a lot of those, several of those calls out of town. From a WEMS point of view, 3,048 calls, almost 96.1% call coverage. That's pretty phenomenal for an ambulance service around here. And again, in August, we expected to be down 334 calls, and we caught them all up and then some. So, all in all, the call volume was very respectable, and again, worth noting, 9 cardiac arrest saves and 1 baby delivery. I think the one thing to note, just as a reminder, is that NEQ will always lag a little bit behind an ambulance because at night we only have 1 up. And so when it gets called out and the next call comes, we're dropping a call. And, we've debated over and all about putting a second tech up at night. We'd like to. We just haven't found a way to make the financial math work. Last Friday night when I was the duty medic, Wayne County had no paramedics up. We were covering into Wayne County as well as our town. They had none up in the entire evening. The next group of data I won't go through in detail, but I want you to start seeing the names of the people that are making a difference. These are the paramedics and the EMTs that either were on the cardiac arrest saves, in NEQ, in WEMS, that delivered the baby, or that provided the RSI support in our region. I'm hoping that once the pandemic settles down, we can have a ceremony to recognize these folks more appropriately. But at this stage, I think it's important for you to know who they are, and I'd like them in the town record in the minutes. If we go to the next page, I think one of the things that we talk often about is why a community ambulance makes a difference and why ALS in your town makes a difference. And it really is a game of minutes, right? We talk about, when you're not breathing or you're on the floor hurting or something has gone bad, you don't want to wait for Lake and Ridge or someone coming from, Honeyway Falls like we had a few weekends ago to come help. And so we use the MILREMS, the Monroe Livingston Regional EMS metrics, as our benchmarks. And if you look at the highlighted blue columns, in every respect, we beat the metrics. But, for the ALS time, 90.2 and 91.2 for WEMS, that's pretty good. When you look at the next box, we almost can't score anymore. We get to 97 and 99, and the last two, we had to truncate the boundaries because we were so far inside of them. The other thing that I think you'll notice in the boxes below is where we're taking our calls. I think it's interesting to note, we're going to Parrington, we're going to East Rochester, we go to Sodus, we go to Williamson, we help in Irondequoit in Ontario quite a bit. The ambulance is going into Irondequoit and Penfield, and AMR is covering the city when they're having civil unrest and events like that. And so I just wanted to really reiterate something I said earlier in the year, is this ambulance that this town has established and the ALS service that we have had doesn't just serve our town, it goes to our neighbors, and it helps in a pretty broad area. The other thing that we talked about in August even was we never dropped our staffing. So almost every one of my colleagues that I talked to on a biweekly basis at some point during the second and third quarter altered staffing. We kept it up. We kept it up with great financial challenges, and in the end, it allowed us to go support other communities. And when the civil unrest happened, as you know, we supported the SWAT teams and responded to back up Irondequoit when the unrest from the city came north. So, I think we've done a pretty commendable job of keeping the dollars to where we need to make sure the ambulances are rolling and the fly cars are available. The next page is a chart you don't normally see, and I thought it was interesting because I know our supervisor is a numbers guy. And, he often wonders and looks at me, why can't you balance your budget? It's, well, because I don't know how. And the challenge we face is, if you look at the calls in March, look at the dips we took. It's impossible to predict those. Then, the next week or next month, you go into April, and it just took right off. So had we altered our staffing and had people gone to work somewhere else, we wouldn't have been able to recover. Then things kind of go jibber-jabberish all over the place, and then August took right off again. Right? People had been out for a few months. They were not wearing their masks. COVID was starting to take off. Then in November, we had a dip, and then end of November into December, it took off. So what I'm trying to illustrate is this makes it very hard for us to financially plan, because when we have the dips, what happens next is we don't get income. Right? There's a 60-day lag, and all of a sudden, there's no checks coming in because we didn't take anyone to the hospital. And so if you go to the next page, I'll give a highlight on the operational updates. Number one is the building. Thank God it's finally moving. It's going in fits and spurts. The weather for this week is not helping us, but we're hoping in April to have a home. Right now, our people are sleeping between ambulances on cots. It is ridiculous to me. I cannot understand it. I cannot reconcile it in my head. In order to keep our social distance, we've got buildings in this community that are empty for first responders, and we are trying to get them to sleep on fold-up roll-away beds in between ambulances in bays where the lights don't go off at night. It's hard to be on your best in that case. So I'm praying this building hits on April 1st or early May, because we need it. The other piece that's really worth talking about is our financial situation, right? We didn't put dollars in here, but I want you to understand the Q1 versus Q2 challenges we faced. Quarter 1 of 2020 was a pretty good quarter. We were up 21%. That's the kind of math we like. Q2 and Q3 absolutely tanked, 49 and 59%. You cannot budget for that. You cannot plan for that. And our expenses did not go down during that time frame. So, we took a wicked revenue hit. In the fourth quarter, it bounced back a little bit. Call volumes, as you saw, jumped up, but we couldn't make up that deficit. And why? So if you look at the bullet down below, our income or our expenses increased, right? I won't go through the details, you can read it, but gloves have gone up, masks have gone up, PPE usage has gone up dramatically, expenses of fuel and vehicle maintenance have gone up. So we're really struggling this dilemma. Our revenue is in the tank, and our expenses are going up at a rate we have no control over. But we still have to balance this seesaw, as I say. And, the one thing that, Supervisor, we've talked about in the past is on the west side of town, we continue to just hemorrhage. NEQ, we're well over $100,000 in our losses for people that we write off that don't get an ambulance bill, they get the ALS bill. Medicare, Medicaid doesn't pay, and we're not going to ask an 80-year-old woman to give up her mortgage or her medicine to pay for an ambulance or an ALS trip.
So I know that the money that we budget for WEMS is to address this right here.
And it doesn't touch half
I
of it.
wrote myself a note to ask you this question because you have this bullet right off on the website. The town continued to grow, well over 100,000 in 2020. So my question is just off the top of your head, what is the average write-off per year, say, for the last 4 or 5 years?
The average write-off?
Yeah.
So we've been consistently over $100,000 for the last 2 years. I can tell you that factually.
Okay. And I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. So the next bullet is a little bit of things that you know, but it's worth mentioning because people think of us as the people that take people to the hospital and generate a bill. But we do a lot of other things, and EMS is obviously the top of it. We help with emergency management in our community, right? We run the Webster EMS Council, or Emergency Responder Council. We help with standbys. We don't charge for those here. Community education, right? We've got the education team helping and participating with PSAs and other things that we try to do. Mutual aid, as you saw. COVID testing. We do that voluntarily. The county doesn't give us anything for that. We've got 3 of us that are on a 24-hour clock, 7 days a week, that pass a phone around, and we're testing first responders. There's no compensation for the county for that, right? We come in on our weekends. I have the weekend phone from Friday afternoon until Sunday night, well, Monday morning in most cases. That phone is ringing. My dinners are interrupted. I'm going to do first responder testing. No one is paying us for that. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do for our community and our fellow first responders. Non-emergency transports. It's not infrequently that we get a phone call from somebody who says, hey, my X and Y has broken a leg. They need a ride home from the hospital. Can you come get them? Or my X and Y needs to go to a doctor's appointment and we can't get them there. Can you come? And we'll grab an ambulance. We'll run over. There's no bills generated for that. That's a courtesy we do for our community, right? We don't treat them as a patient or as a PCR. We'll just give them a ride. But we do it more often than not. And it's something that the town board needs to be aware of because there's no record of it.
Can you repeat that just a little slower? Because what you said, just got through saying, I think is very important that the people of this community need to know of what you're not being compensated for with respect to going to the hospital and picking these people up.
Well, we do it as a courtesy, right? So somebody's like a fireman's family member or someone that the town knows, they need a ride back and they're waiting for the contracted agency, we can bring them home. So they call, we throw an ambulance up, or we grab them. The other over the holidays, I got a call from one of the nursing home facilities. We need an ambulance right now. I'm like, call 911. No, we need it like right now. I'm like, what's going on? Well, we need to get from one facility to another facility before 2 o'clock. When all the receiving staff leaves, can you come get somebody? So I literally left my house in my jeans, grabbed an ambulance with a partner, and we zipped over and we took this patient because they had to get to a COVID ward before the ward stopped receiving patients for Christmas Eve, right? I had stuff to do that day, right? And this is the things we do that don't fall in our compensation models.
No, you're absolutely right. There's a lot that you do for our community, and that's why I just wanted you to reiterate that.
Yeah, no, and Ahmed, would you like to come back to do round 2 of this
I would.
at the first workshop of February? Because this is a 13-page report, and we're still on page 4, and it's 6:15.
I'm going to wrap up right now, actually.
Really?
Yes, because
Oh.
I just wanted to, before you say you're going to wrap up, I think it's very important that you come back also to go over.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information in here, especially from a financial aspect, that I have not seen before during your presentations. I feel it's very important information, and it needs to be discussed and presented again. So I would really appreciate it if you would come back.
Again, televised or whatever you want to call it, shown, I think is important, because I mean, for example, I wanted to ask you just a little bit about the write-offs on the west side.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Medicare and Medicaid not paying is one thing, but there's also other reasons, correct?
Well, the key reason is because Webster can't bill.
Yes.
So
right.
that's
And-
the
and-
primary
The thing
reason.
is, people need to know that.
Yeah, they do.
That there's a reason why there's, right, the west side is different than the rest.
And I couldn't agree more. If you'll come back at the first workshop of February, which is February 11th, and I think now I can see from this report and where we're at and the questions, I've already written down 6 questions, so selfishly, I think we'll carve out some more time for you, for the board, but for the community. Like you said, Charlie, these workshops are at
So the last few pages are the supervisor's request. When I came in November, December for the contract, you said, could I try and help unravel the EMS billing question?
Yeah.
So what those are is, a colleague from another EMS agency actually gave them to me, so I can't claim all of the authorship myself. But if you would review and see if that helps answer that question, that's what the backup slides are.
Yep, and I'm
It's to start
gonna,
addressing
but we're gonna get you on for February 11th.
Okay.
And it's like a tease
In the beginning,
for the.
Or the end.
Beginning.
in the beginning,
In the beginning.
All right, and I'll negotiate with Barry of how much time we carve out for you.
all he needs.
All right. Thank you very much.
Minimum half hour. Thank you, Ahmed.
That
Great presentation, by the way. Good information.
That concludes our workshop agenda items tonight. Geez, I had a New Year's resolution, Charlie, I'm sorry, next time.
That's all right. I got it for you. It's, would you, Mr. Supervisor, I think you and the town board. If you wish to go into executive session to discuss the employment, hiring of any particular individual under Public Officers Law 105, Subdivision 1, Subdivision F, need to go into executive session. And,
So moved.
That is my motion.
okay. Second? All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Okay.